Please be seated. The court is now in session. Today, the chamber continues to hear the remaining testimony of 2 TCCP 1063, and after that, we begin hearing testimony of a witness, namely 2 TCW 1069. Ms. Sakalwati, please report the attendance of the parties and other individuals to today's proceedings. Grazie, Mr. President. For today's proceedings, all parties to this case are present. Mr. Pech Ong, the National Lead Co-Lawyer for Civil Parties, is absent for personal reasons. Mr. Nuon Chea is present in the holding cell downstairs. He has waived his right to be present in the courtroom. The waiver has been delivered to the greffier. The civil party who is to conclude his testimony today, that is 2 TCCP 1063, is present in the courtroom. And the upcoming witness, that is 2 TCW 1069, confirms that through his best knowledge, he has no relationship by blood or by law to any of the two accused, that is Nuon Chea and Keo Sampon, or to any of the civil parties admitted in this case. The witness took an oath before the Arena Club statute this morning and is waiting to be called by the chamber in the waiting room. Thank you. President, thank you, Mr. Sakalwati. The chamber now decides on the request by Nuon Chea. The chamber has received a waiver from Nuon Chea dated 1st December 2016, which states that due to his health, that is headache, back pain, he cannot sit or concentrate for long, and in order to effectively participate in future hearings, he requests to waive his rights to be present at the 1st December 2016 hearing. Having seen the medical report of Nuon Chea by the duty doctor for the accused at the ECCC, dated 1st December 2016, which notes that today Nuon Chea has a lower back pain and feels dizzy when he sits for long, and recommends that the chamber shall grant him his request so that he can follow the proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs. Based on the above information and pursuant to Rule 81.5 of the ECCC internal rules, the chamber grants Nuon Chea his request to follow today's proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs via an audio-visual means. The chamber instructs the AV unit personnel to link the proceedings to the room downstairs so that Nuon Chea can follow. That applies for the whole day. The chamber now hands the floor to the defense teams. First, to the defense team for Nuon Chea to put questions to this civil party. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. We don't have any questions.
Thank you. And now I hand the floor to the co-counsel for Keo Sampon to put questions to this civil party.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Civil Party. My name is Anta Gise. I am International Co-Counsel for Mr. Keo Sampan. Alongside my colleague Kong Samon, I have a few supplementary questions to put to you regarding your testimony. I would like us to start with the period before 1975, and I would like us to revisit 2 points. Yesterday, at about 15 hours 39, you stated that you had remained a combatant in the Lon Nol Army for 3 months. However, I did not hear when you became a soldier. Can you specify that to the chamber?
Good morning, Mr. President. I became a Lunar soldier in 1971.
Et j'ai cru comprendre également.
And I also believe I understood from your testimony that you had stopped being a soldier and had returned to civilian life after you were wounded. Did I properly understand your testimony?
Yes, that's what I testified yesterday.
Et quand vous dites
And when you state that you returned to civilian life, did you mean to say that you returned to farming?
At that time, I stopped being a soldier and I became a farmer.
vous avez également parlé
You also talked about your father, and if I understood you correctly, he was a militia man in a militia, and I believe his name was Kong Srai Krai. Is that the case? And I also understood that in that militia, his task was to prevent soldiers, Vietnamese soldiers, from entering Cambodian territory. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I testified yesterday. Because people were enlisted in the militia groups in order to collaborate with the Lunar soldiers, that is, to base ourselves in the real battlefield.
quand vous dites qu'ils étaient mis sur la liste.
When you say that he was placed on the list, do you mean that he was placed on the list by Lunar troops?
Please repeat your question.
Vous dites
You state that he was placed on the list to collaborate with Lunar troops. My question was, who placed militia men on the list? Was it a military authority who did that?
The names were put on the list by the commune authority and not by the soldier, not by the military. It was the commune chief who enlisted them into this militia group.
et est-ce que vous savez, ce sera ma dernière question sur
This will be my last question on the point. Do you know whether there were any clashes between those militia men and members of the revolution?
Yes, at the times there were frictions between the groups, and there were those who opposed the revolution.
un autre point de précision.
Another point I would like you to clarify is that I do not quite understand when the Khmer Rouge arrived in your area. Was it solely at the time of the evacuation of the 17th of April 1975, or the revolutionary forces arrived in your area before then?
In Svay Rieng province, they entered on the 14th, that is before the New Year's Day. The Revolutionary Army entered the Swaring provincial town on that day, and they chased the people away, and that happened before the 17th April.
Quand vous dites le 14,
When you say the 14th, are you talking of the 14th of April? That is the 14th of April 1975.
Yes, it refers to the 14th of April, which was the Khmer New Year's Day, and that was the day that the Revolutionary Army entered the Swaring residence. The question is whether it was the 14th April 1975, because you only refers to 14. So please be specific whether it was the 14th of April 75. Answer. Mr. President, I refer to the 14th April 1975.
donc, ce sera mon dernier point.
Now we'll talk about the last point regarding this period. So we agree that up to the 14th of April 1975, which means that your area was under the influence of Lon Nol, that is Lon Nol troops. Is that correct?
On the 17th, I was the victim of the Revolutionary Army, because there was a time that I was chased away from the Swaring provincial town, and at that time the Vietnamese soldiers actually fired to threaten the people to leave the town. And I was so shocked, and for that reason I could not bring any belongings with me, and we were told that we would leave town for 2 or 3 days and that we will be allowed to return. But since that day, none of the people was allowed to return to the town, and we were subsequently evacuated elsewhere.
D'accord.
Very well. My question was different. I wanted you to confirm that up until the time of the evacuation and before the arrival of the Revolutionary Army, your zone and your commune were under the authority or the influence of Lon Nol soldiers, that is the Lon Nol Army.
Before that time, I lived under the authority of Lon Nol.
Je voudrais maintenant en venir aux différentes...
I'd like us to revisit the various statements you gave as part of your participation in this trial. And I'd like to go through the chronology with you. We have case 3 and different forms that you filled out. The first form is E3/10650, 2nd of August 2008. That is the first form you filled out as part of your civil party statement. We have a second form, document E3/59321, or rather A32A. I forgot to mention the A. E3/10670A, small a. And then you have an additional supplementary form dated the 2nd of April 2010, document E3/5932A. And lastly, we have a supplementary information form which is in the investigation of case 004 not 002, and it's E3/10670, which was forwarded by your lawyer on the 5th of January 2015. Does this refresh your memory as regards the various forms you filled out? And do you agree with me that you filed a first form in 2008, a supplementary information form in 2010, and lastly, a document dated 2014 or early 2015? Does that refresh your memory?
Yes, I can recall some.
Je voudrais
I would like us to start by talking about the first form, that is that of the 2008, in which you were admitted as a civil party in this case. Regarding the circumstances under which you filled out that first form, can you tell the Chamber whether during that period you already had a lawyer? If not, who assisted you in filling out that civil party application form?
I cannot recall. I cannot recall about what happened during the filling in of the form.
D'accord. Est-ce que vous vous souvenez?
Very well. Do you at least remember whether someone assisted you or you filled it out yourself?
Yes, there was someone who assisted me in filling out the form, but I cannot recall the detail.
D'accord. Sans vous.
Very well. Without recalling the name of the person, do you remember whether that person was a lawyer or a member of any organization?
The person was a staff of an organization, but I cannot recall the name of that organization.
D'accord.
Very well. In that form, you talk about your visit to a market, but you never make mention of Kyosampan in that form, and I'm referring to document E3/10670 small a, and the ERN in English is 00422-204, ERN in Khmer 003975, or rather 7758. And this is what you say regarding your visit to that market. And I'll quote what you state in English.
We were asked aboard, and the next morning we arrived in Psart Mai and stayed there for 3 nights. Each of us was given a package of cooked rice, 1 green scarf, and a set of clothes. We later on were transported in a truck by the Khmer Rouge to the railway station at 1 p.m. I took the train and arrived at Prethray at 12 p.m. after traveling for 1 day and 1 night. End of quote. Donc ma première question.
My first question, in light of this passage, is as follows. You state that you were at Sao Tome, that is the central market. Yesterday, I believe I understood from the explanations you gave to the civil party lawyer that you had mentioned that visit to the central market because you did not know Phnom Penh, and that is why you got mixed up. But at the same time, on the second form, which we'll talk about shortly, when the civil party lawyer asked you how you knew that that was Saddam Ko, you said that people had told you so. My first question, therefore, is as follows. If you knew that it was the market called Saddam Ko, because people told you so, why didn't you say so the first time you filled the form?
At that time, I was not familiar with the location, and later on, when people said about it, then I knew that it was a Psa Chba Ampo. Even today, I am not so familiar with that market.
Quand vous dites plus tard, c'est à quel moment?
When you say later, what do you mean? What time are you referring to?
When I said later, I means that and that happened after the liberation by Hun Sen's soldiers.
D'accord, donc vous avez su que...
Very well. You knew that it wasn't the central market after the liberation by the Hun Sen soldiers. But when you filled out the form in 2008, you already knew that it wasn't the central market, but Sva Ampo. Is that not the case?
I means to say Chba Ampo market or Psa Chba Ampo.
D'accord, mais comme vous le savez...
Right. But when you are speaking about the period when you had already been liberated by the Hun Sen soldiers, why did you still talk about Satme in filling out that first form?
President Civil Party, please hold on. And Civil Party lawyer, you have the floor. Please turn on the microphone. Mr. President, I object to this question because the Civil Party did not say it was Hun Sen soldiers who told him about the Psa Chba Ampo. So if this line of questions is allowed to continue, it's going to get the civil party confused. Thank you.
Je pense que ça doit être un problème.
I believe it may be an interpretation problem because that is what I heard in French. Mr. Civil Party, can you tell us who informed you that it was the Sa Chva Ampo and not the central market? And when were you informed of that?
When you asked me a question previously, maybe I was too quick in my response. I did not mean that I was told by Hun Sen's soldiers. What I meant is that I was told after the Hun Sen soldiers liberated us. I was told by people, but not by Hun Sen soldiers.
តាមពិត
And in fact, it was people, that is after the liberation in 1979, whom I met and I spoke to them. They said about the evacuation from Svay Rieng, and I asked whether we were instructed to rest at Psa Thmai or Psa Chba Ampo. And those people who were evacuated when I was said that we were evacuated and stayed at Psa Chba Ampo. There were other people from other provinces who were evacuated to stay in Central Market. Since at the time people were evacuated from 3 provinces, Prey Veng, Svay Rieng and Kampong Cham, and some of the evacuees were allowed to rest at the Central Market, while others were allowed to stay at Psa Chba Ampo or Chba Ampo Market.
D'accord.
Very well. My question remains the same, therefore. Since after the liberation by the Hun Sen troops, you had received that information, why, therefore, in 2008, do you still talk of the Central Market?
I apologize. Maybe I did not pay much attention to that, and it is probably my mix-up.
Dans le passage que je vous ai cité,
In the passage I quoted, you talk of your visit, but you do not talk of the presence of Kyo Sampan. Can you explain why?
Because when I spoke, maybe I did not say everything, and probably I only spoke in response to the questions that I were asked.
mais comme vous mentionnez,
That since you make mention of the distribution of food, scarves, and clothes, and the fact that you were transported in trucks to subsequently go to the railway station, and you give details on that day, in your statement before the chamber, you appear to have forgotten about the distribution of food and supplies when Kyo Sampan arrived. Even though you may not have been asked specific questions, why did you not make mention of that?
I cannot catch your question, Counsel. Could you repeat it?
à l'audience, lorsque vous
At the hearing, when you talk about the arrival of these food supplies, etc., you say that they arrived in 2 trucks, or at least 2 vehicles, in which Kyo Sampan was also in these vehicles, and that it was after his arrival that these goods were distributed to you. So there is a link between the distribution and the presence of Kyo Sampan in what you recounted in the hearing. So my question is, why didn't you mention it then in your first information form, even without any specific questions about it, because it corresponds to what you're describing in that document, when you were receiving food and supplies, etc.?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Juste une courte remarque.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a brief comment. I've made several observations throughout this trial on the way in which the NGOs were noted down regarding the civil parties to begin with, and I would like to note again that it's not necessarily the witness who did not mention it, but perhaps the staff of the NGO that did not write it down, because they're the ones that recorded the words of the civil party. It's not the civil party who wrote it. So once again, the defense is, of course, authorized to mention the civil party forms today, but I think that we are all very aware of the specific circumstances under which these documents were noted down by the NGOs. Thank you. Antaguise, I do understand these arguments by my colleague, but I would like to have the explanation from the witness himself. So I will continue with my questioning, Mr. Civil Party, because there was a link with the alleged arrival of Kyo Sampan and the distribution of these supplies. Why was it not mentioned in this initial document?
Allow me to inform the chamber. At the time of the writing, I myself did not fill in the information. It was the person from Angka who wrote about it. Questions were put to me, and I gave my answers at the time accordingly. In fact, that was the experience that I underwent at the time. That's what I experienced.
Vous avez signé.
You signed this document and it was reread to you before you signed it. Is that correct?
I did not recall at the time. I do not recall if that document, that application, the information was read back to me.
Sur la même page.
On the same page that I referred to earlier, in the story you recount at the time that this first information sheet was created, there is mention of Sui Chik et Sui Por. So this part of your statement, which is not of interest in the absolute sense, but simply there is the name of one of the leaders of the cooperative mentioned that you ostensibly mentioned on that day. So my question is as follows. At the time that you saw Kyo Sampan, or you say that you saw him at this market, did you know what his function was, what post he held?
Mr. President, I testified about that yesterday. I cannot remember his position and role at the time.
Est-ce que
Without knowing what position he held, did you think that it was someone of importance in the state of Democratic Kampuchea? Or did you think that he was just someone who might have had the same level as the head of a cooperative, for example?
Mr. President, at the time, he held a high position, one of the senior persons, but I do not recall his rank and his position. What I can recall is that he held a high position in the leadership, the senior leadership at the time.
And during the DK period, did it happen often that you met people who you thought had a higher level?
I never met them at the time, as I was an ordinary citizen residing in a rural area. It was only when I was evacuated to North Phnom Penh I met him. That was the only time.
Est-ce que nous sommes d'accord?
In that context, are we in agreement that this meeting with the person that was considered to be a senior leader was exceptional?
I agree with what you said. People in general rarely had the occasion to meet those senior people.
D'accord.
All right. So my question, and this will be the last point on this particular item in the document. This was an exceptional event. As far as you remember, did you mention this event to the person who assisted you in filling out the form and who perhaps had just simply forgotten to write down the name of Kyo Sampong?
Your Honors, I believe it's only fair to the witness that counsel indicate the section of the form where this is written, because the section of the form is entitled, in English, Description of Crimes, what crimes occurred and how they occurred. So this is what the general question that's being answered by the witness when he recounts what happened to him and to his family. It wasn't a question about how the criminal policies were formulated and how the leadership formulated the policies. If you look at the beginning of the section, it says description of crimes, what crimes occurred, and how they occurred.
Là encore, Monsieur le Président.
There again, Mr. President, that is an argument that could be the prosecution's position when there are closing arguments at the end, that Kyo Sampong's name does not appear in this form. Nevertheless, my question is legitimate, and even more so because afterwards there is the name of the head of the cooperative, which is also mentioned. So my question remains, insofar as you remember, Mr. Civil Party.
Counsel indicate, where's the name of the head of the cooperative?
C'est donc le document.
So the document is E3/10760. The ERN in English is 00422-204, and in Khmer 00397758. And as follows.
You were a bit too quick for me for the repetition of the E number.
C'est le document.
It's document E3/10/670A. It's the document from the 2nd of August 2008, the first such document of the Civil Party. So I maintain my question. Mr. Civil Party, insofar as you remember, did you mention the name Kyo Sampon to this person during this first interview? And does this name not appear in the document in spite of what you recounted, because the person that was in charge of drafting the document forgot it? Do you remember having mentioned this incident?